Good day and welcome to the Canadian Anti-Semitism Education Foundation special web talk, Kosovo and Israel, Building an Alliance for a Better World. I'm Andrea Spindle, Executive Director of CAEF and the moderator for today's webinar. Today we have a unique opportunity to learn about the relatively new country of Kosovo from its representative in Toronto, Consul General Donat Sila, and the very new relationship it has with Israel. CAEF is excited to welcome this new relationship between Kosovo and Israel, an important milestone for both countries. CAEF has been concerned about rising anti-Semitism in this country and globally for the last 2 decades. CAEF focuses on freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom from persecution and discrimination for all minorities. In the immediate past 2 years, we've witnessed the insidious, almost undetected, and oft-denied anti-Zionism, which is anti-Semitism. This Jew hatred is on the increase, largely due to the fact that anti-Semites are emboldened by the general malaise in society that does not call out the denigration and demonization of Israel as anti-Semitic, while accepting the slander and falsehoods promulgated by those who adhere to the divisiveness of identity politics that relegates Jews to the category of oppressor and Israel to the role of an apartheid state. The liars and Jew haters deceive themselves, and until recently, they successfully deceived large swaths of the world and pretty much all Muslim countries. However, we are witnessing a transformation in global alliances, the normalization of relationships between Muslim Arab countries and Jewish Israel, and increasingly warm relations between Israel and many African countries. One of the newest relationships to be acknowledged and celebrated is between Kosovo and Israel, which was formally announced in February 2021 and dramatically implemented in March, on March 14th this year, when Kosovo opened its embassy in Jerusalem, thus recognizing Jerusalem as the eternal capital of Israel. This is enormously significant, as most Western European allies of Israel are still holdouts for some mythical notion that they can declare Tel Aviv the capital. And secondly, because Kosovo is a Muslim majority country. I am sure our audience is as excited as I am to hear from Consul General Sila about this new alliance and how it benefits both countries and the world at large. It is now my extreme pleasure to introduce Consul General Galit Baram, Consul General for Israel in Toronto, who in so many ways brings her intelligence, her warmth, and her generous nature to our Jewish community and to people all over Canada. Consul General Baram has a BA in Archaeology and English and a master's degree in American Studies. She is fluent in Hebrew, Russian, and English. She has served in the Israeli Embassy in Washington, D.C., in Cairo, and Moscow. And prior to her current post, Ms. Baram served as Director of the Department for Palestinian Affairs and Regional Cooperation. Welcome, Ms. Baram.
Thank you very much. Thank you, friends. Thank you for this warm introduction. This is my 5th year, and I'm heading back to Israel in the summer. And I have to tell you that this Jewish community is amazing with its organization and activity and dedication to anything that has to do with the state of Israel and maintaining Israel diaspora relations. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to serve my country in Canada, in Toronto and Western Canada. I'm very glad to participate at an event with my colleague, Donat Sila. We're good friends, and I have to tell you that in the diplomatic community in general in Toronto, which is very large in international terms, we every now and then we meet diplomats for an exchange not only of political views and discussion of diplomacy, but just for social events as well, which is an integral part of diplomatic life. And I'm very glad that we're attending now a webinar together. I'm looking forward to hearing Donat's presentation. A couple of words about the busy days that we're experiencing in Israel these days. I'm actually speaking to you from the Jezreel Valley. I'm now in Israel, joining you from Israel via social media. And thank God for technology that enables us to be in touch and maintain relations during these very challenging days of COVID. We've been through a 4th round of election only recently in Israel, and hopefully a coalition government will be formed soon in Israel. We definitely need that after 4 rounds of election in 2 years. In addition to that, Israel is leading the campaign to fight the COVID pandemic with a very large number of citizens. More than 50% of Israel's population have been vaccinated, and we do cooperate openly, generously, willingly with many countries around the world when it comes to fighting this global pandemic, including Canada, including countries in the Middle East, Muslim countries, and European countries as well, all over the world, because we believe that the information that is obtained and gained in Israel should be shared with others. When it comes to foreign relations, again, it's been a year of achievements, dramatic achievements for Israel, with the signing of the Abraham Accords and establishment of full diplomatic relations with the United Arab Emirates, with Bahrain, the renewal of diplomatic relations with Morocco, negotiations with Sudan, and of course, the groundbreaking agreements with Kosovo, and the opening of the embassy of Kosovo in Jerusalem. We intend to continue maintaining full diplomatic relations, friendly diplomatic relations, both with Serbia and with Kosovo, to build bridges and to cooperate fully when it comes to economic relations, when it comes to academic ties, and of course, tourism. We believe that, with all due respect to governments, and I'm representing a government here, relations between nations are built between people. And we look forward to strengthening and broadening the relations between Israel and Kosovo. I would like to thank the Canadian Anti-Semitism Education Foundation for concentrating on this issue, on this aspect of Israel's foreign relations and diplomacy in general. And I'm looking forward to Donat's presentation. Thank you very much for inviting me. And I would like to take the opportunity to wish you all a happy Passover just around the corner. And for those, for Christians and Muslims among us, happy Easter, which will be celebrated on April 14th. And Ramadan, by the way, the holy month of Ramadan is beginning just around the corner in a couple of weeks. So we have many reasons to celebrate. Good health to all, and I'm watching you from Jerusalem. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Consul General Graham. And I didn't know until this morning that you were in Israel. So thank you so much for staying up and talking to us. I'm now pleased to introduce Dave Gordon, a Toronto-based journalist, author, and marketing consultant who made the introduction for me to our guest speaker, and I'm very thankful to him for that. Dave, will you now formally introduce our guest?
Oh, sure. It's first of all, thank you, Andrea. Thank you to everyone at CAEF for putting this on. It is very much a privilege of mine, not just to introduce Consul General Sila, but someone who I have a professional kinship with, in a sense, because he is a former journalist of 10 years, having been editor-in-chief of Kosovo's national broadcaster, and in addition to being a journalism professor at the University of Pristina. So we have this sort of professional kinship in a sense, and also a kinship in a way because going back a number of years when I used to work for the Canadian Society for Yad Vashem, I found out about Albania's rescue of Jews during the Shoah, which I'm sure Consul General Sila will talk more about in his presentation. I eventually bought this book called Rescue in Albania. I'll make this rather brief, but on Holocaust Remembrance, International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Back in January, I posted on Facebook a picture of myself with this book and a blurb that said, what few people don't know is that Albania rescued all of its Jews during the Shoah. And that led to a mutual friend of mine and Consul General Sila's to make an introduction between us. We had a great chat, and by gosh, that's what led us to today, is this idea that we have to learn more about Kosovo and its relationship with the Jewish people and its relationship with Israel and its relationship during the Shoah. So I'm incredibly pleased and honored to be able to introduce all of you to someone who I consider a friend and someone who I consider has a great insight to impart to all of us. So please, without much further ado, welcome Consul General Sila.
Thank you, Dave, for the introduction and for your continuous support. I would also like to thank representatives of the Canadian Anti-Semitism Education Fund for hosting this event. Ms. Andrea Spindel, thank you for organizing this webinar. I would also like to thank my colleague, my Consul General of Israel, Galit Baram, and for your opening remarks, and a heartfelt thank you to all of you that joined us today to give me the opportunity to talk about the special relationship between our two countries. Shabbat, greetings, and in my language, Bashandetje. I represent a part of a small nation in the Balkans, specifically Kosovo, because Albanians live divided in 5 countries in their historical lands. I also proudly represent other citizens of the Republic of Kosovo, including Serbs, Turks, Bosniaks, Romas, that enjoyed advanced community rights in the Republic of Kosovo. Albanians, together with Greeks, are the only autochthonous nations in Southeast Europe. But because of the strategic relevance of this region, we suffered a lot during history from different invaders like the Ottoman Empire and more recently from Serbia. Kosovo, the country which I represent, after a bloody war and ethnic cleansing from Serbian regime, finally gained its independence in 2008 with the strong support of the United States and remarkable help from the Jewish community in the United States. My country, Kosovo, is recognized almost from 120 countries all over the world, mainly from Western countries and with the strong support of the United States. Against our independence are countries such as Russia, China, and Serbia. Before I continue, I would like to share a compilation video that my colleague Arita and I edited together. As a former journalist, I can't say that we did the job right by borrowing material from authors, which we thank and are so grateful for. I apologize in advance for viewers that don't speak Hebrew because a bit of it will be in Hebrew with Albanian subtitles, not in English. It will be part where current Prime Minister Netanyahu with the Jewish people in 1999 prayed for the Albanians in Kosovo that were going through horrific ethnic cleansing. There are so many videos, books, and documentaries about the Albanian-Jewish bond, but we made an effort to put together a modest visual. So I asked Tech Team to play the video.
Albania was the only country in Europe to emerge from the Second World War with a larger Jewish population than before the war. This is because the Albanian people protected and sheltered Jews reaching the country from all over occupied Europe, fleeing the atrocities of the Nazi regime and its supporters. As testified by survivors and historians alike, many Albanian families risked their lives for this noble mission. Jews lived in Albania and Kosovo working as merchants, doctors and craftsmen. In Albania, there are still Jewish quarters to be found in cities such as Tirana and Vlora, where they had synagogues. In Elbasan, there are still the remains of the Jewish market. Before the Holocaust, there were only 200 Jews living in Albania. During World War II, another 2,000 arrived. In Pristina, Kosovo's capital, the synagogue was built at the end of the 19th century, and the Jewish bazaar was the most famous in this part of the Balkans. Apart from their native languages, the Jews of Albania and Kosovo also learned Albanian, Turkish, and Serbian. In 1935, Albert Einstein benefited from Albanian hospitality to transit from Europe to America. He stayed in Durrës for 3 days in the royal mansion and then, equipped with an Albanian passport, continued his journey towards the free world. During the war, Albania and Kosovo were initially under Italian occupation. The local Albanian government utilised its authority to the maximum by refusing to hand over lists of Jews to the German forces. The Jews found shelter in many Albanian households in cities, but when the threat grew too high from the occupying forces' frequent checkpoints, the Jews would go to the mountains pretending to be local shepherds. According to some, Besa, the Albanian sworn oath, with its duty towards guests, was one of the main reasons Albanians helped Jews in need. At the time, the Albanian Prime Minister Mustafa Krya wrote to the successor of the Italian king in Tirana, Francesco Giacomoni, and asked him to help in transferring the Jews from Kosovo to Albania, where they could be more protected.
Krya actually went to Giacomoni. Giacomoni is the viceroy in Albania. At this point, he is still in charge. Obviously, the Germans had not occupied Albania yet in 1941. And he went to Giacomoni and he told him, this is what we're doing. We're distributing these Jews among the Albanian people, etc., gave them papers and names, and so on. And Giacomoni said, go right ahead. I will not report this to Rome. And we have done this in some cases ourselves in Italy.
From Dalmatia, Montenegro, Serbia, and Macedonia came 350 Jews, and over 400 from Greece. According to the Albanian Kanun, the Code of Conduct, the Albanian household belongs both to God and the guest.
They knew we were Jewish. The Germans were all over the place. We had other immigrants who lived in other parts of Tirana, and nobody ever was threatened or was denounced to the Germans. It was just understood that we were Albanians, and that was it. It was good. The Albanian people were good, and we were safe.
More than 60 years have passed since the end of the Holocaust, but the heroism and humanity of the Albanian righteous among the nations will always be remembered by the survivors and their descendants alike. Mrs. Irene Grunbaum, one of the most famous Holocaust survivors, recounts her memories in Albania with these words. Goodbye, Albania. You offered us so much hospitality, shelter, friendship, and adventure. Goodbye, Albania. One day, I shall tell the whole world about how brave, loyal, and generous your sons are, putting their lives on the scale of death in order to save ours.
שום דבר איננו משתווה, אולי איננו יכול גם להשתוות, לשואת עמנו. אבל כיהודים איננו יכולים לעמוד מנגד, מול המראות בקוסובו, של אלפי פליטים שגורשו מבתיהם, של פנים מפוחדות הניבטות מקרונות הרכבות, של ילדים שאיבדו את הוריהם. כיהודים המראה הזה מצמרר אותנו יותר מכל עם אחר. וכיהודים יש לנו אחריות מיוחדת לזכור, להבין ולפעול. I think Albania is the only country whose Jewish population during the Holocaust actually grew because of the refuge and the sanctuary and the friendship and courage showed by the people of Albania. We never forget our friends.
I hope after watching this video, you are interested in watching the full documentary, and I know that the presentation slides have been shared with all of you. There you'll have a YouTube link for the full documentary. I want to start this discussion with the pandemic that hit the globe and caused suffering for the human race. Some of us have even lost loved ones throughout Africa, Europe, Asia, and America. The pandemic showed us more than ever that the human species must be more unified than ever in achieving its aspirations. Fortunately, pharmaceutical companies managed to produce a vaccine in a record time, and we hope that soon everyone will be vaccinated and we can finally cut the road short for this horrible virus. On another positive note, while in quarantine, I lived to see a man-made robot bring us images from planet Mars. Just wow. The modern world let us experience this too. But when there is the will and the desire, even during a pandemic, many great things can be done. This is what the Republic of Kosovo and the State of Israel did. Kosovo is grateful for the State of Israel and its government for recognizing our country and establishing diplomatic relations. Israel and Kosovo established their diplomatic relations through virtual online platforms. In fact, this was done for the first time in the history of world diplomacy. Meanwhile, Kosovo recently and proudly opened its embassy in Jerusalem, alongside our strongest ally, the United States of America. Kosovar politics and diplomacy has consistently pursued a pro-American policy regardless of which of the two camps is in charge of the state. We are grateful for President Trump's administration as well as President Biden and the previous administration for the increased interest they have in our country. At the same time, we are grateful to the State of Israel for accepting our country as an independent state. Recognition by Israel for the people of Kosovo has a great significance due to the many reasons and facts that strengthen our sovereignty and strengthen our argument to countries that have not yet recognized the state of Kosovo, that our case is sui generis in the world and should receive support from all over the democratic world and follow the example of Israel and other countries that are producers of avant-garde values and democracy. In fact, Israel has given solidarity and closeness to Albanians and the people of Kosovo, even in our most difficult days. We will never forget the support and shelter that Kosovo Albanians, refugees received from Israel when Slobodan Milosevic's criminal regime was aiming to ethnically cleanse Kosovo of Albanians in 1999, just as we will never forget acts of solidarity of the Israeli people and policy towards Kosovo even at that time. And this has been consistently proven by the Jewish people, for whom we are very grateful for. But everything has a history. During World War II, the only country where there was actually a larger Jewish community after the war than before the war was Albania, and there is a reason for it. In our tradition, under the Albanian Besa Code of Honor, for anyone who enters one's property, our responsibilities as a nation are to protect anyone who is in danger. And this rule is applicable anywhere in the Albanian regions. I'm very proud that I represent a country that during a period of anti-Semitism, it was the only country in Europe who sided with the Jewish community. Today, in my capital city, Pristina, there is a memorial in the center of the city for the remembrance of the Jewish community. My country succeeded in fulfilling its political aspiration only in the 21st century, but its history, culture, and language are among the oldest in European civilization. The period of freedom, democracy, and human rights would be impossible in that part of Europe without strong support from more democratic countries. Despite the influence of the Soviet Union era, the people of Kosovo shared common values with countries such as the United States, Israel, Canada, and Western European countries. However, the road to the freedom of my country was a very difficult one. Many young boys and girls devoted their lives in fighting to defend their country during the last war in Kosovo. And many women, children, and elderly were murdered and massacred. Hundreds of thousands of others have been forced to abandon their homeland. 20,000 victims were raped during the war. And even today, after 20 years, many families in Kosovo are not able to locate the remains of their missing family members. The senseless ruler of this tragedy was a man named Slatan Milosevic, who caused all these tragedies only because we were Albanians. Today, Kosovo has a scenery completely different from that of the years of occupation. Firstly, Kosovo has one of the most advanced constitutions in the world when human rights and freedoms of diverse communities are fully respected. Kosovo has shown remarkable development progress. There are no signs of war in Kosovo today because everything has been restored from the very beginning. Kosovo has made significant progress both in terms of infrastructure and economic growth, but above all, its empowerment as a state has been recognized from more than 110 countries around the world. Kosovo has also established its own army, which will guarantee peace and stability in our homeland. From being a recipient of security, Kosovo has recently become a provider of security. This major step could not have been achieved without support of the United States. For the first time, Kosovo military troops will serve in a peacekeeping mission with United States troops in Kuwait. Finally, I should mention there are three major religions in our culture. There are Muslims, Catholics, and Orthodox. So our national identity abstracted religion and was built on the basis of the language and traditions and indigenous customs of the Albanian ethnicity in this area of Europe. The greatest hero of the Albanians is Gjergj Kastrioti Skanderbeg, whom fought the Ottoman Empire, was born an Orthodox, grew up as a Muslim, and died a Christian. So in our country, we live in a symbiosis of religions which are not in conflict with each other because they all have a good purpose, love of God. During my mission here, our community has the will to name a street in Toronto, Besa, as a way to commemorate the Jewish community sheltered in Kosovo during the age of anti-Semitism. This step forward would be a very significant step in strengthening relations between our two nations. In this occasion, I also want to thank Consular James Pasternak and his team from York Center, Toronto, for his willingness to help us place a plaque in the Earl Bales Park. I really wish to see a Besa memorial which will symbolize the Albanian Jewish friendship and loyalty even here in Canada. I would also be very happy to find support to rebuild a synagogue in my capital city, Pristina, where there used to be a synagogue. I'm convinced that many people in Pristina would welcome this idea by further enriching the diversity in the city and by building new bridges with our Jewish friends now that our common paths have no obstacles. Once again, I would like to thank all of our viewers, and I would be more than happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We will get to questions. I wanted to just share with you that I did a little reading about the Jewish history of Kosovo, of which I knew nothing, and discovered that the Jews arrived in Kosovo in 1455. It was remarkable to learn that. And that as late as 1912, there are still 3,000 Jews living there. So there is a long Jewish history. I think both our peoples need to learn that and to cherish that for what we are now going to see going forward. So I do have a few questions for you, Consul General. Perhaps you could just tell us what prompted, what might be the single most important aspect of prompting the relationship between Kosovo and Israel now?
As I mentioned earlier, Albanians, who are the majority of the population in Kosovo, have a long history of friendly relations with Israel. Kosovo is calling on all countries who do not seek to recognize its independence to recognize it. Alongside United States and Canada and the majority of the West, the recognition by Israel strengthens Kosovo's international subjectivity. Kosovo is not part of the United Nations because of the obstacles it has from Russia and China, because they are a member of Security Council of the United Nations. But by increasing the number of qualitative recognition, our international subjectivity is being strengthened. So far, as I mentioned, over 110 countries or more than half of the United Nations member states have recognized Kosovo. Recognition by Israel is one of the most significant recognitions for Kosovo.
Does Kosovo have a position on the Palestinian-Arab-Israeli conflict?
Well, as I Kosovo, as I said before, as I mentioned before, Kosovo has its biggest ally, the United States. So that is why our foreign policy are subordinated to a coordination with the United States of America. I know that the so-called Palestinian ambassador to Serbia and other Palestinian representatives have always been very vocal in their threats against Kosovo, that they will use their influence to prevent countries that have not recognized Kosovo from recognizing its independence, while lobbying together with Serbia for the non-recognition of Kosovo, especially in the countries of the Islamic world. However, we believe in the orientation of the countries of the free and democratic world, exactly at the time when democracy was spread in the Eastern Bloc. With the collapse of the Berlin Wall, the opportunity was created for us as a nation to realize our aspirations.
So it sounds like both Israel and Kosovo can continue to do each other a favor by supporting those positions. Israel should encourage more countries to recognize Kosovo, and Kosovo to encourage countries to recognize Jerusalem. Would that be true?
Well, you know, Kosovo is a country with a little, to be honest, is a country with little influence in international politics. And it also faces challenges of international recognition. But what I can say is that in the region of the Western Balkans, that is where Albania, Montenegro, Macedonia, Croatia are, Kosovo's decisions to establish its embassy in Jerusalem is a push for these countries, I believe. Not leaving aside Serbia, which has promised in the Washington Oval Office that it will relocate its embassy in Jerusalem, but this promise has not yet been fulfilled. On the other side, of course, even Israel can, despite that we are a small country, even Israel, like as I mentioned before, that the tolerance between religions here in Kosovo and in all Albanian territories, it's like a good example of tolerance for, I mean, for all the people in the world, like they live in peace together.
Thank you. I'm really intrigued with this concept of Besa. Am I saying it right? Which I understood to be Albanian. Is it a Muslim concept, or is it a specifically Albanian cultural concept?
No, it's in our tradition. It's in our, like, it has a long history with, because as I mentioned before, we were like, we suffered a lot during the history, and we suffered during Ottoman Empire, during Roman Empire, during Serbian regime here in Kosovo and in different places of our territories. And Albanians, they made their own law, how to say, and and it was like it was kind of functioning between Albanians, and like it was kind the way how to manage social life between the Albanians.
I think there is a similar concept, though, in the Jewish tradition. It's called, I think, Jacob's tent, where the welcoming of strangers means all sides of the tent should be open so people can come in. I think there's something similar there. Can you correct me if I'm wrong? Kosovo has also, has it not accepted and adopted the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism? Am I correct?
Say again, please. You're coming from.
Kosovo has recognized the international definition of anti-Semitism and has adopted it as a position to be opposed to anti-Semitism.
Yes, I think, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about, you said there was an interest in rebuilding the synagogue. My understanding is there was a lot of destruction of Jewish properties in Kosovo, Albania. Is there any attempt to rebuild some of the other properties or to compensate people who had properties there?
I can say that both the state and various organizations operating in Kosovo are constantly engaged in conserving the Jewish heritage in Kosovo. I know that the organizations dealing with the promotion of the Jewish heritage have an initiative for the reconstruction of the synagogue in Pristina, and for this they have had the support of the institutions, but this issue has remained unresolved due to the lack of funds so far.
So I have a question here from someone in the audience. We know that Albania saved Jews from not only that country, but from other countries that found safety there. There was also, though, was there not some anti-Semitism and some, what's the word, collaborators with the Nazis, were there not within that period of time as well?
Well, I don't have that information. You know, like Balkan was in trouble. Like there were wars between people, nations of Balkans, and on the other side there were Nazis and Italians like invading Balkans. So they were fighting each other. But I can mention even I know that let's say our neighbors from Serbia, like some of them were with the Nazis and some of them were with communists. Even I cannot say that in Albanian part there were some Albanians that were with the Nazis, but above all, I can say that most of the Albanians, they were taking care of Jews and they were part of their families.
Thank you.
And the statistics shows that this reality.
What are some of the benefits that you see now in the relationship with Israel? What kind of exchanges do you anticipate between the two countries? Whether, you know, cultural, agricultural, technical, what do you think is going to be beneficial to each?
Well, I can talk about Kosovo. As I said before, the recognition by Israel for Kosovo is one of the most important recognitions for our country and strengthens the international subjectivity of our country. Kosovo has not yet recognized by the 5 countries of the European Union, like Spain, Greece, Slovakia, Cyprus, and Romania. Some of these countries have explicitly feared that the recognition of Kosovo's independence could provoke destabilizing situation in their countries. For example, the case of Spain with Catalonia. Mm-hmm. However, we and our allies have repeatedly explained that Kosovo is sui generis. This was also stated by the International Court of Justice in 2010. I know that President Hisashi Ovada, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing right the name, of this court, he said that the declaration of independence of Kosovo on February 17, 2008 did not violate international law. This is the main argument viewed from the point of view of strengthening the state of Kosovo and increasing the number of recognition by countries that have not yet recognized the independence of Kosovo. So a very powerful argument is the recognition by Israel. Meanwhile, there's another dimension in this new stage between our two countries, with the establishment of diplomatic relations and the establishment of our embassy in Jerusalem, we convey the signal to all other countries that communication between nations and cultures make them better connected with each other and more tolerant. I am convinced that when today's participants of this event thought about Kosovo, they immediately thought of the war that happened in 1999, but not the good things that my people represent.
And you mentioned that Albanians are in several other countries near and far. Can you just to give us a broader understanding, how many Albanian people are there outside of Kosovo, and how many are actually in Albania? How large is this population?
In the beginning of my speech, I mentioned that we live divided in 5 countries. Like we live in Albania, in Kosovo, in Macedonia, in Montenegro, and in Greece, and in southeast Serbia, so Preševo Valley. So, like, if we go back in history, in 1912, when we declared independence, the independence was declared in all these territories. But then the decisions from superpowers during the history, they divided us. So I don't have exact statistics because we have a large diaspora, but we are, in these regions, we are more than 7 million Albanians.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
Approximately.
So basically, if you were all in one place, it's like the size of Israel in terms of the Jewish population. We're similar. Would Kosovo welcome immigration from Jews today?
Of course, Kosovo is a very friendly country, and Albanians are very friendly people. I believe that I can confirm that this with any foreigner who has visited Kosovo. One thing to know is that Kosovo, with all the progress it has achieved during this past 4 years in terms of economic development and reducing unemployment, is among the most underdeveloped countries in Europe. I know some foreigners who have come to live in Kosovo, mainly who have come to make their investments in various areas of business. Therefore, the arrival of every Jew would be very welcome for the people of Kosovo.
Is Kosovo experiencing, I mean, every country seems to be experiencing some level of anti-Semitism these days. Sadly, it's true in Canada, it's true in the US. There is no place where, I mean, it's a matter of degree, but it's certainly universal. Can you say that the same might be true right now in Kosovo, that whether there are Jews there or not, there's anti-Semitism?
As I mentioned in my speech, we suffered a lot during the history from different invaders. So we did not cultivate that, if I can say, way of thinking about hating another nation. So I can definitely say that that way of thinking is not present in my country.
Okay, my last question. You mentioned that teaching the heritage, the total cultural heritage of the country would include perhaps teaching about the Jewish history of Kosovo and the contributions of Jews. Do you see that as likely to happen?
Say again, please.
Are you looking to the near future to have Jewish heritage content in the school curriculum for Kosovo?
I know that I, together with, in cooperation with one organization of, with one organization in Kosovo, Jewish community, Beth Israel Kosovo, we are working together, like to bring books in the Ministry of Security Forces of Kosovo, some books from culture of Israel, history of Israel, and regarding this, I would like to thank Ms. Consul General Galit Baram and her colleagues for giving us the books and support. And I would also like to thank other people here in Canada that are helping us to collect those books, and we're expecting to deliver some books in Kosovo in next coming days. But I think there is a will, and we are open like to learn more about Jewish culture and Jewish history. And you know, we are like we are open to people and nations who have a friendly attitude to us.
That's interesting, because I was going to say, maybe you could tell us what you need and what could be provided by the Jewish community to assist. I see Consul General Baram smiling. I'm sure that there are people that would love to encourage that kind of exchange.
I can say that Albanians of Kosovo and all Albanians in general have sympathy for Jewish people, because in your suffering during history, we see our own suffering. So in no way is there any prejudice on religious grounds, or, you know. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. Well, I'm sure we could speak much longer. There are many things that I have in my own mind to ask, but I'm just looking at the time, and I think I've covered most of the questions people have asked. So I'm now pleased to invite Councillor James Pasternak of Toronto City Council to close today's webinar. Councillor Pasternak has served on City Council since 2010. And among his many contributions and achievements are two that I would like to highlight. He led the move to update the 15-year-old City of Toronto anti-discrimination policy, and I'm hoping he's going to help us get the IHRA adopted. I'm watching for that. And he also helped to investigate the role of the city in prohibiting hate rallies from taking place on city property. These are two very important ideas and concerns that have affected the Jewish community. And Councillor Pasternak is a very strong supporter of our community. I'm very pleased to welcome him here today.
Great. Well, thank you very much. On behalf of Mayor John Tory and my colleagues at City Council, I just wanted to thank all the participants and, of course, the viewers for the event today. I'd like to thank Consul General Donat Sila, of course, Galit Baram, who she mentions her term in Toronto is coming to an end, and she will be sorely missed. It has been an absolute pleasure to share the stage with you for many important events over the years, and it just reaffirms that Toronto will always be a great friend of Israel. I'd like to thank the moderator, Andrea Spindle, and the great work you're doing with the Canadian Anti-Semitism Education Foundation. Of course, a friend and journalist, Dave Gordon, for, I believe he helped put all this together. And this is all greatly appreciated, because it brings together important elements of what makes the civil society, bringing the diplomatic corps together, bringing a free press together, and of course, bringing our social capital together, those who are advocating against discrimination, racism, intolerance, and bringing together people who share the values of respect and energized by the need to combat all forms of racism, notably anti-Semitism, fighting back on Holocaust denial, and of course, we must end the endless campaign against Israel, a smear campaign that's been going on since the late 60s, fed by primarily ignorance and anti-Semitism. And we can see many in the world community, including Kosovo, waking up to the reality that Israel is a liberal democratic country that is often seen as having one of the most ethical military forces in the world. It welcomes people from all over the world and contributes in so many different areas to make our world safer, to make our world healthier, and of course, to save lives. City of Toronto has always been very excited about doing the Yom Ha'atzmaut flag raising with the Consul General. The Walk for Israel, when it was safe to do so, was actually held in my ward, and it was a great honor to address the crowd. We've gathered on some more solemn events such as Yom HaShoah, and of course we've celebrated the various holidays at City Hall, including Hanukkah and Passover, and of course Rosh Hashanah. And this is why, this is a symbolic of why Toronto is one of the most desirable places in the world to come, to start a new life, to raise a family, to start a business, because of the civility and livability that we cherish here in the city. Consul General Sila, you've mentioned some kind of recognition, a friendship garden or a friendship monument between Israel or the Jewish community in Kosovo. I want to assure you that we are fully supportive of that, and we are going to be working on that in the months ahead. And of course, I cherish the virtual visit that we had earlier in the year, and we look forward to many more. On the anti-Semitism front, this March 30th, an item will be coming to the Mayor's Executive Committee, which I push for, to include resources for the city to more vigorously fight anti-Semitism in all its forms. This will be directing staff to create more initiatives to whether it's through education or through a dialogue with our other levels of government to fight anti-Semitism in all its form. So with that, I know the hour is growing late, but I wanted to once again thank all the participants, the panelists, and Dave for organizing this, and of course all those who are tuning in. I want to wish everybody a Hag Sameach, a happy and healthy Passover, and of course going forward, we all want the worst of the pandemic to be put behind us so we can get back to what we all remember as a somewhat normal day-to-day routine. I want everyone to be safe and healthy. And I thank you once again on behalf of Mayor John Tory and my colleagues at City Council for the opportunity to bring a greeting and close off the event.
Thank you so much, Councillor. We really appreciate it. I want to just take this moment to thank Galit Barman, because I didn't realize that she was leaving so soon, and I don't know if we'll get to be seeing each other in person, but it's been a pleasure having the opportunity to see you and work with you, and I support and love what you do, and send us another wonderful candidate, a representative, please. And thank you, Consul General Sila, for taking the time. I appreciate your time, and your assistant was wonderful to work with. I look forward to seeing all of you. I want to invite everyone to our next webinar, April 1st, 7:30 p.m. We will hear from Ben Freeman, who's an author, educator, who wrote a book called Building Jewish Pride, Rebuilding Jewish Pride. And the reason for having it 7:30 p.m., he'll be speaking to us from Hong Kong, and it'll be 7:30 a.m. the next day for him. So please put that in your calendar. And until then, stay safe, Chag Sameach, happy Passover, and everybody be well. Thank you.